Welcome to Connected. I'm your host, Haley Trimboli, and whether you are PhD curious or you are currently navigating your PhD program or wondering what your fellow graduates are up to, this podcast is your go-to for inspiring stories, actionable insights, and meaningful connections within the PhD community. Great. Today we have an incredible guest, Dr. Natalie Perez. She is a research scientist at Amazon with an interdisciplinary background that brings together educational technology, retention support services, instructional design, and organizational psychology. Her expertise lies in mixed methods and design-based research with applications in both higher education and corporate environments. Natalie earned her PhD in Learning Design and Technology from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2022, where she explored identity formation and tutoring through her dissertation, Who Am I? An interpretative phenomenological analysis of tutors' lived experiences. And beyond her primary research, she also focuses on qualitative methodologies and the impact of generative AI in organizational and operational settings. Welcome to the podcast, Natalie.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So where does this episode find you today?
I am tuning in from Oahu on one of the art islands in Hawaii where I was born and raised.
Yes, what a lovely place. So thank you. Let's just jump right into it. What even made you think about starting a PhD? Like, was there a specific moment when you knew that this was the right path for you?
I had never thought that I would pursue a PhD. I joined my graduate program and I was loving the practitioner work that I was doing and wasn't a huge fan of research work. So I didn't really ever think that I was going to pursue a PhD. After completing my master's program at the University of Hawaii and working full-time, I started to kind of reflect on research and started to sort of see opportunities in my work where I wish I had a stronger foundation and knowledge set in research. Mm-hmm. So I think it was really at these interesting events in work where I was questioned about data or questioned about program evaluation or questioned about learning evaluation. And I didn't feel very confident in my responses. And I was working at the University of Hawaii at the time, and there was an opportunity for me to take school, to enroll potentially in a PhD program and have that funded. And so I decided to try. I threw in my application and waited. I was really excited to be accepted into the PhD program at the Learning Design and Technology department, and decided to pursue my coursework there. Really wanting, just genuinely curious about research and what it meant to be a researcher.
Yeah, the research aspect of the PhD is so foundational. So I'm not surprised that drew you into wanting to go in a little bit deeper through the PhD aspect of it. And so learning design and technology, were you drawn to that because there was like the opportunity or because that was sort of where your work was already at and you wanted to like specifically get into that particular topic subject deeper?
I think it was a seamless transition for me into that program. A couple years back, I was hired by the university and was asked to support online learning and support services. And I had no idea what that meant. I was initially working on a master's degree in composition and rhetoric and really wanted to be an English professor. That was my goal. And I was working towards that career. And then being hired and asked to support online learning, I realized I don't know much about what that means. And so I simultaneously, while I was working on my master's program, started to look around for other master's programs and found the Learning Design and Technology program, but really focused on online learning and instructional design. And I was very interested. And so decided to take a break from my composition and rhetoric program and dive into this Learning Design and Technology program for my master's. And I fell in love with it. And I learned so much about what it meant to design and develop curriculum, online learning experiences, materials in the online world or hybrid world. And the faculty and staff there were amazing. They, as a faculty and staff, really focus on this concept of ohana, which means family, and really trying to create a warm family type environment for students. And they truly did. I mean, I just really loved working with all the faculty and staff. And so when I thought about what my next step would be in terms of a PhD, I really didn't even consider any other program. It was just very clear that this program was something that I was interested in, was learning a lot about, was helping my work. And I just really loved the environment that the faculty and staff created for their students.
Yeah, that's amazing and super, super important to be enjoying the folks that you're going to be around for an extended period of time. So I'm happy to hear that was a positive experience for you. I know that might not always be the case for everybody. And what a huge shift. I don't think I realized that you went from one master's program to the other, which is like a huge change in sort of the trajectory of likely where you ended up in this PhD program and probably where you are now.
Oh, absolutely. And I felt honestly terrible. And I also felt like a bit of a failure in a way because
Mm,
I had heard, and I myself had bounced around a little bit in my undergrad, kind of trying to figure
mhm,
out what I really wanted to do and what I wanted to
mhm,
major in. And I ended up majoring in literature and
mhm,
humanities. And so I really kind of loved that field. And so I thought, well, I enjoy this field. I'm going to dive into it in my master's program. So took the GR, got everything lined up. I was
mhm,
a scholarship recipient. I was serving as a graduate TA and
mm,
embedded in that program. And then when I decided to shift out of that program, that was really difficult. And
mhm,
I, felt awful. And I didn't know that people like left graduate programs. And so it was
mhm.
just sort of interesting thing that nobody really talked about. Stepping away from that program was initially, I felt really guilty. And now sort of learning about different career journeys and pathways, realizing that it's quite normal for people to shift as they
Mhm,
explore and discover what they really enjoy and want to do, not only in undergraduate, but graduate studies as well. So
mhm,
that is a unique part of my path for
mhm.
sure in trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to do in grad school.
Yeah, yeah, I really appreciate that insight because I think it can feel like when we make a choice, like there's some sort of responsibility to stay locked into it. But I do think sort of the way things shift, like there's so many different career journeys and they don't all look the same. And a key point of that might be jumping to a different program that makes more sense. So I think that's super applicable.
Yeah. So,
And what I was going to ask is, since you already, it sounded like your master's sort of led into the PhD somewhat seamlessly. Like, did you go through a formal application process? What did that look like for you? Was it different because you were already a student in the master's program? Just trying to shine a little bit of light on like the like tactical how to actually get into the PhD progress or program and like what that looked like for you.
yeah, it's a great question. My department, I think, really prides itself on objectivity and making sure that they're selecting the right candidates for their program. And so I had initially reached out. I knew many of the faculty, but not all of the faculty who taught in the PhD program. And so I reached out to a few faculty who I was familiar with and asked a little bit
Mhm.
more about the PhD program. I learned that I had to, even though I had submitted a GRE to my master's program, I still had to submit a GRE to my PhD program. I still had to write, a letter describing why I think I would be a great candidate for the program. And I had to get 3 different references that they could not be references within my program.
Mhm.
And so that was a unique challenge to sort of
Mhm.
find who I had built earlier relationships, either during my master's program or my undergrad, to write letters of
Mhm.
recommendation on my behalf, since no one
Mhm.
in my program was eligible to write a letter on my behalf. So I think that, in that way, there's a lot of people who knew me from the master's program, but they still expected me to complete that application process as if I was a brand new incoming student to their program. And that was something that I was surprised about, but I thought was a really great practice in terms of wanting to, I think, as much as possible, be an objective reviewer of different student applications.
Yeah, yeah, super good to know. And I have to like ask, like, so the switch, like, do you still use anything? Like, how do you use anything from your bachelor's or that beginning master's? Like, do you see the skills that you learned in that program still helping you, whether like now or within your PhD?
Absolutely. I reflect on it often that
Mm-hmm.
there's a number of things, but there's 2 core things that I think I use all the time. Aside from critical thinking skills that we are constantly pushed to use when analyzing any type of medium in writing or in multimedia, I learned to be a stronger writer just naturally because
Right.
in English undergrad, that was really the objective.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the outcomes or these, activity or task requirements is to write. And so I did a lot of writing and I got so much constructive feedback on my writing. And I think that really helped to ramp up my writing skills.
Yeah.
The second thing that I think is kind of a connection with that problem solving and sort of critical analysis skills is reflexivity. And that's something that in my program, I was constantly having to reflect, to sort of critically analyze and then reflect, critically analyze, reflect, and write. And I think that reflexivity is really important in just about anything that we're doing. And certainly was really a useful initial skill that I was able to further develop in the PhD program. So I would definitely say like writing and reflection were really key that I was able to take and use very seamlessly in my master's and PhD program. And I absolutely use every single day in my current role. And I'm just so thankful that I think those early and initial learning experiences really helped me to develop a higher proficiency of writing. I definitely can write relatively quickly these days. And I think that really attributes to those early formative experiences.
Yeah, that's actually like kind of best case scenario to have a writing background, because I feel like most people get into a PhD and they might be interested in the topic or the research, but at the end of the day, you're producing a dissertation that is 200, 300, 400 pages of writing. And it's such a foundational part of the PhD is writing, period, and being able to articulate those ideas. So actually, like, wow, what a beautiful path to be able to just bring that into what was going to be expected of you further down the line.
Yeah, it was really kind of a seamless thing. I mean, obviously, there's different gaps that I did come into the PhD program with, but certainly writing, I don't think was as much of a gap as it might have been for other skills and initial exposure into what it means to be using rhetoric to persuade.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely want to like dig into that a little bit later on, is like sharing that message in a corporate industry type of environment versus academia, and kind of how you had to transition there. Because I think that sometimes they can be very different. One last question, sort of pre-PhD, is like the financial aspect. Like, did that influence the program that you chose? Because I know that there's sort of a couple different routes. Like, you can be a fully funded scholar, you can pay for your own scholarship. Like, was that a huge factor into your decision, into the journey ahead for you? Like, what sort of insight might you share on other folks who are thinking about this financial component of getting into a PhD program and sort of the different avenues that are out there?
I was initially given some interesting advice from a faculty member during my undergrad program. And that individual said, Natalie, don't ever go to graduate school unless it's fully funded. And that was a really interesting statement because I think there's some layers there that I didn't realize as a student. I think those layers really focused on the type of graduate program that you're going into and the available jobs in the job market, and really trying to determine, are you going to be pursuing a graduate program that has jobs readily available in your area, or just have jobs that are kind of hot on the market. And so I went into my program with that in mind, that, okay, I need to go to a school and enroll in a program that's funded. And fortunately, I was able to get funding for my initial program, and that was all good to go. And then I was actually very luckily able to get funding for my second master's program as an employee of the university. And so that was sort of a no-brainer. And I kind of stuck to that advice that I had received. And then I had initial funding with my PhD as an employee of the university before pivoting and changing careers. And then I had no funding. And, was able to get some scholarships, but wasn't able to fully fund my PhD. And, that kind of took me to a reflection point of going back to my undergraduate professor and thinking, well, is this worth it for me to continue to finish this PhD program and pay it out? And what I think I've realized over the years is that I think that if you get funding for a graduate program, that's amazing. if you don't get funding for a graduate program, what I found is that I really reflect on, is this something that I enjoy? And is this something that I'm going to stress out in trying to figure out how to pay for this program post-school? Are there jobs available for me in my community that I want to stay and live in, or do I have to move elsewhere? So it's a lot, I think, of evaluating my circumstances and what I want and sort of future-proofing whether or not this program is going to make sense longer term. And I definitely found that with the Learning Design and Technology program, that there seemed to be a lot of opportunities to be able to work across many different industries. And that's, I think, what I was most attracted to that program, is that I could work in an academic setting or a corporate setting or a nonprofit setting. And it really didn't limit necessarily me working and doing technical work with, software development engineer curriculum or K through 12, in a school setting. And so that, I think, reflection point made it worth it for me to just say, hey, I'm going to continue to get out some student loans and also, use some of my scholarships that I was able to get to pay for my graduate program. But I think it's challenging to sort of figure out whether you stick with funding or non-funding. And I definitely think there's several different factors that anyone considering pursuing graduate school should be reflecting on, because I would hate to see, and I've got some friends, who have sort of pursued graduate school with some really great degrees, but not necessarily jobs available in their local market. And so, now they're doing a job that they really don't love.
Yeah.
But it's because that job is available in the local community and not to school for. So I think it's a real challenge that is not an easy answer for anyone.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that you got a very strong perspective from folks. And I think some people might have a very strong perspective on it, but sort of there's key things that you can reflect on, and that there are two avenues for a reason. And so I think that in any of them, there are some trade-offs that people have to consider based on, I love the insights that you pointed out, what does the job market look like? Sort of what does that future state look like for you? So yeah, great things to consider. So then you get into a PhD program. What was your experience like in the program? Was it what you expected?
Good question. Every single one of my degrees, whether it was my associate's degree or bachelor's or master's, every time I sit into a classroom for the very first time, imposter syndrome to the max. What am I doing here? I'm the least smart person in this room. I shouldn't be, taking up a seat. I have very, very brilliant people to my left and to my right. And so I think it was initial imposter syndrome, which has just been a pattern of mine throughout my entire educational career and continues to be, something that I struggle and battle with depending on the different settings that I'm invited to speak at or participate in. So that was expected, the imposter syndrome. But, after those initial weeks and that community development that I started to build with my colleagues and, my fellow students and my professors and the staff, I began to become a little bit more comfortable and really sort of generate and build my confidence that, I think, maybe I do deserve a spot here. I'm not as smart as everyone in the room, but I have some ideas that I can help, add to the conversation here. So I think those initial confidence building exercises were really helpful in getting me more familiar and myself to just accept that maybe I do deserve a spot in this table. I think that what was unsurprising is I had a really strong cohort experience with my master's degree program. And so I was expecting to have a pretty great cohort experience with my PhD program since it was a similar cohort structure. What I didn't anticipate with the PhD is how much stronger my relationships were built and developed with doctoral students as compared to my master's students. And I think that, I could imagine a few different reasons we're in the program longer, we're seeing each other longer, but there's some vulnerable aspects that I think that we all sort of shared at different points in our experience of I don't know what this means, or I don't know how to do this. That I really don't feel like we ever sort of touched on curriculum where anyone, at least in my experience, seemed to really feel, kind of in left field. And so I think that we also worked through some family experiences. I started my PhD program 3 months pregnant, and had my son just after Christmas. So we were on break and, jumped back into my PhD coursework 6 weeks postpartum. I had other friends who ended up getting pregnant and having babies in that cohort. And then we had other, friends who had family members pass away or family members sick. And so just kind of doing life together over those, 4 to 5 years also just allowed us to form some much deeper relationships. And I have a group in my cohort that, we chat, some of us weekly. We get together and for coffee or for dinner or for lunch to catch up. It just feels like the relationships in that PhD program were so much stronger. As much as I love everyone in my master's program, that was a special experience. And so that was something that was pretty unanticipated, walking away from that experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I had a similar experience too. I think that maybe it's just something to do with also the where you are a little later in life and the family things that do come up. And I think through that, you get to know people a lot better because of the way that they're navigating all these things, school, family, work, their topic, and everything. So I think the cohort experience is really powerful in the PhD program. I'm not sure what percentage follow that, but I do think that is a very foundational part of it, to have that community and help you get through it. I think a lot of times I've heard that, when folks are feeling down, you can then lean on those folks too and kind of get back up to where you might need to be if you're doubting things and such.
Absolutely. It's such a unique and special experience. And I like you, I'm really thankful for that cohort.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had a baby in the middle of your PhD program. Amazing. So and you were working too at the university at that time?
Yep. I was working
Okay.
full-time. Yep. And then graduate school full-time. And then, here's now a mom and need to figure out how to be a mom.
Wow. So tell us, how did you manage this? How did you balance these things, the practical, unpractical? What was this like?
Yeah, I am first and foremost really thankful for the amount of leave from work that I was able to get. I know that each state is a bit different. Here in the state of Hawaii, I was able to take 3 months off with a mixture of vacation time and family medical leave. And so 3 full months off was really nice from work. And so I could just focus on postpartum recovery and learning how to be a mom with a newborn, and then continuing to focus on my studies. And then after those 3 months, I was able to go back to work just part-time for 2 months before returning to work full-time after 6 months. So that sort of 5 to 6 month period of not having to necessarily work full-time was, I think, a really incredible experience. And I was very thankful for that. And so really being able to focus on school and being a mom was great. I was homebound a lot. And so it was great to not only be able to spend time really investing and spending time with my little baby, but I also found that the intellectual stimulation from courses over Zoom was just the right mix for me. I really did miss those intellectual kind of deep dive conversations. And that was, I think, a really nice balance between figuring out newborn life and diapers and feeds and not getting much sleep, but still being able to have this cohort and this group of people who many of them were parents and, some of them had older kids, some of them had younger kids, but just kind of being there to support me was great. And of course, being born and raised in Hawaii and having a relatively large family, I had a great network of support with my family, my parents coming to help, and of course my husband, and then some of my siblings being able to really help and support after I started to go back to work full time and try and manage between school and work. My family was integral in making that happen and ensuring that, somebody was able to watch my son while I was in school or at work. So I have to say having family support was critical. There certainly were times when I was taking my son in and he was right there in the stroller while I was giving presentations at work.
Yeah.
Or, at school, of course.
Nice.
But I was really fortunate to also have a workplace and an educational program that was really welcoming and supportive of me being a parent, and sometimes bringing my little one in to class sessions and lots of classmates holding and taking places, watching. So I had such a great support network, and I don't think I would have been able to survive without it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. Both your classmates and your family, and being able to help you through that very big milestone in your life in many ways. So amazing. So your dissertation explored identity formation and tutoring. Can you break down a little bit like how you focused in on this particular topic, like what you discovered, just kind of like briefly touching on what landed you to this particular topic for your dissertation?
Yeah, of course. I have always been interested in tutoring, and I started as a student tutor back in 2012, and loved the experience. And once I graduated as my undergrad, I was asked to come back and work at my undergraduate's tutoring center as a sort of interim tutoring coordinator supervisor. And so I had been working in that tutoring space for a while and was asked to really start to lead the online rollout of tutoring, which sparked this interest in wanting to shift over to the Learning Design and Development program.
Mm,
I ended up focusing my master's program on an instructional design project focused on training tutors in online environments online. So an
mm-hmm,
online curriculum focused on how do you tutor online.
mm,
And I knew that I really wanted to focus on that in particular because in doing a lot of research around tutoring in the academic environment, what I found is that the tutoring center is often marginalized as just a space that's a little bit more expendable and not necessarily a space of much focus or research. And there's not as much funding going into that
mm,
particular, I think, very important campus service. And so I knew that for my PhD, I really wanted to focus on something that had to do with online tutoring, but I didn't quite know what. I knew what my topic was. And so that was a good starting place. Going in day one, online tutoring, that's what it was going to be, but didn't quite
mm,
know how that was all going to shape out.
mm-hmm,
So as I started to work through my coursework, whenever I was able to, in each of my courses, I tried to focus on online tutoring. And
mm-hmm,
through that process and going through the different research methodologies, design-based research and mixed methods research and quantitative and qualitative, all of these different courses, and I eventually started to sort of shake out an idea of what I wanted to do and ultimately where we saw gaps in research literature. And what I
mm-hmm,
found was that there was a ton of research devoted to, again, instructors' transitions in online environment and what that did to their roles and their experiences. But there was really no literature that focused on what student tutors' experiences were like transitioning into the online environment and what that did to role identity. And so I was really interested to focus in on that experience. And of course, during that experience, COVID happened.
right.
And I was expecting to, I had a small sample population of students that I could sort of tap into who were tutoring in online environments. But then everyone ended up tutoring in online
Wow.
environments. That really like blew up my opportunity to talk to people. But it was
Yeah.
also such a challenging time.
Mm-hmm,
It was a very sensitive time where there was a lot of things happening. People were struggling. And so it was sort of interesting experience trying to sort of find people who were willing to share their stories with me.
mm-hmm,
But ultimately, what I found is that writing tutors have somewhat similar experiences with instructors in transitioning to the online environment. In some ways, they are very adaptive. Sometimes tutors tend to take on more directive tutoring roles, which is not necessarily a role that is celebrated in the writing space, but sometimes just given the modality, it's easier to take on a more directive role. Sometimes tutors are taking on indirective roles. Sometimes tutors are having to be sort of technologists and troubleshooters,
mm,
very much unlike their experiences in, on campus in-person
mm-hmm,
settings. And so ultimately, what I discovered is that also there's a lot of resources that were being sort of dedicated and shared and supporting instructors to make this transition online. And there was very few resources
mm-hmm,
for student tutors and teaching them and educating to make this online transition and experience. And I can't necessarily blame,
mm-hmm,
but I think the reality is that institutions needed to just, by and large, spend more time and resources dedicated to helping their students who are working make that transition online. And
mm-hmm.
in addition to the support institutions were trying to provide to faculty and staff. And I knew that was challenging even for faculty and staff. So it was a really interesting experience. But that's a little bit about the journey to that topic and ultimately some of the interesting findings that I got out of this.
Yeah, that's amazing. And probably, I mean, to your point, like not enough literature on it. So you probably had to do a lot of deep diving there for your writing, I can only imagine. Are you still in this community, like working on this topic today? Or was this something that you're sort of like, you did the work, like you're maybe applying some of that knowledge in other ways? Or are you still in that community as well?
I'm glad you asked that question. After stopping working at the university in that tutoring center, I really found myself becoming to be less of an emic and more of an edic. At one point, I found myself as more of an insider and viewed myself as more of an insider. But as I slowly stepped away and started to work on different changes in my career, I pivoted from being sort of this tutor, supervisor, coordinator into a role that focused on directing online teaching and learning. And that really expanded my role, not just to tutoring, but also additional support services and online learning services. And so I realized that as I sort of started to step away from directly working in the tutoring space, I do feel myself to be a bit more of an outsider, certainly. I have, though, been able to work on some studies based on data in my literature that I've been able to kind of wrap around and turn into some publications. And that's been really nice. But currently, I've definitely not been focused as much on the online or tutoring space and have been more focused on concepts and methodologies and research that are a little bit more relevant now to the tasks that I'm working on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I think that's really good to know and valuable insight, because I think the dissertation is like sometimes this gold star in the PhD program, and like life changes, right? And kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier with like the career transitions, like I think there can almost be this sort of weight or pressure of like keeping that with you, because I mean, for different reasons, like maybe because we talk about it a lot, or it's talked about a lot as the dissertation and what you studied, and because it's just the time that you invested into it. It's a huge part of your life and of the PhD program. But like, life evolves, and I think that we might not still be in the communities or the topics that we had previously studied, but there's one, I think, the contribution that is made to it through the research, but also, I think that there's valuable skills that we still take, and as we evolve, we're utilizing those potentially in different ways that more reflect sort of what's around us in the current time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that topic will still be near and dear to my heart. And you're right. I think that we've developed these transferable skills that can be applied to different settings and different concepts and topics. And so I've really found that to be true in my career, and have been learning how to sort of apply these different research skills across a variety of different topics, which has been really fun and interesting, and something that I have been thoroughly enjoying.
Yeah. So then you graduated, and like, was there an immediate shift in your mindset or career direction, or did things unfold gradually? I know you said you did a career transition while you were in your program. So kind of better understanding once you graduated, kind of how did life unfold at that moment?
Yeah, it was a pretty exciting and unexpected career transition 2 weeks before I walked on stage. Hooded. So that was interesting. While I was enrolled in my PhD program, I ended up leaving the university and transitioning into the private corporate sector. And that was a really big change.
Yeah, amazing. It's like so connected to the whole like academia field of like almost like I need grant or I need money to like, you're finding the gap. This is why you're doing research. So I love the parallels that you're able to draw. So kind of just understanding like what's next for you. I know you are exploring like Gen AI and qualitative research. Is this sort of like, what you're building on right now? Like, what are you currently exploring or focusing on these days?
I have always loved qualitative research, and I really think it goes back to my undergrad, where I was starting to learn these initial text-based analyses, and I just didn't really even know it. Like, I didn't know that in some of the work I was doing, I was actually doing content analyses without realizing it, or ethnographies. I did ethnography for my, senior project capstone for my undergrad, and I didn't quite even realize it until, finishing this PhD program. And so I've always had this fascination with qualitative research. And that's certainly been true throughout my undergrad, my master's, and into my PhD, focusing on that interpretative phenomenological analysis of purely qualitative study. I have always just been fascinated with qualitative research. And one of the interesting, challenging points of contention that I've been exploring is scaling qualitative research. I mean, we don't scale qualitative research. It's not meant to scale. It's meant to dive deep and not necessarily get a surface, layer of insight. But I've always sort of been challenged by that in many of my different roles. And so I have been exploring, is there any way that we can appropriately, successfully, and accurately scale qualitative insights? And so I initially was exposed to natural language processing, NLP, and looking at how we can take these large corpus of data and be able to categorize it through topic modeling into sort of these distinct topics, which is amazing. Like I could not, humanly possibly. And so that's like really fascinating to me. But at the same time, I always question, like, is any of this truly accurate? And, so I was initially looking at NLP accuracy from a qualitative lens. And then with this emergence of large language models, small language models, mixture of expert models, state spatial models, I mean, there's all these different types of like new models coming out. I'm always questioning, number one, we can absolutely use these models to identify themes and patterns in the data set. But number two, is any of this accurate? So I've been really interested in trying to figure out how we can best evaluate LMs or any type of generative artificial intelligence models to figure out using strategic human-in-the-loop strategies to be able to scale insights and be more confident in the accuracy of those outputs. So that's the work that I've been really investing in lately. I've got a few different articles that are in progress at the moment, looking at model behavior and thinking about semantic accuracy and the like. So yeah, that's sort of very different, right, from like the work that I've done, but really there is this thread of connection across all of my studies, and that has been qualitative research. And I love qualitative methodology in particular, so I've kind of continued to push that stream along.
Yeah, that's really been like the thread through your research. So I love that. I love that you're able to still look at it and bring different lenses to it based on our current environment and new technologies, and connecting with folks internally to keep exploring and publishing work through it as well, which is huge. So congrats on that too. So awesome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So ending with a couple final questions here that I want to ask. I ask each guest. The first one is, what's one book, podcast, or article that you think every PhD student should read or listen to?
I'm going to say Cresswell's Mixed Methods work is huge. And the reason I think it's huge is I see and work with a lot of people who have either a background in quantitative research exclusively or a background in qualitative research exclusively. And there's not a ton of people that I've had experiences with that are really strong in both quantitative and qualitative research. Cresswell does a lot of research within the education space. I'll get the title because it's like the exact title is slipping my mind, but essentially it's a mixed methods primer and introducing triangulation design and sequential design and nested designs, all of these different designs in which we're taking the power of quantitative research and the power of qualitative research and like appropriately mixing them together. It's a challenging thing, but holy smokes, I have seen the most successful research work be that merging of the two. And that's what I've been really trying to push for in the work that I'm doing with different Gen AI models, is trying to merge together a mixed methods view on data.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And so holistic too, to be able to approach research from both of those lenses. So awesome. Last question. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice before starting your PhD, what would it be?
I'm going to give myself this advice. I don't know if I would take it. Just, it was kind of crazy being a new mom and working full time and going to school full time. My recommendation, though, would be to reach out to those people that I cited all the time. I really didn't form relationships with people outside of my program. I really regret that. I wish that I would have reached out to all of the different core scholars that I was citing repeatedly and over again to start forming relationships with those people. In my post-grad life, I do that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't think about it. And those people I put on a very high pedestal, like they're untouchable. They're not going to want to talk to a lowly me. Again, imposter syndrome. But now kind of out of the PhD program, I really wish I would have invested in some more relationships with scholars in the field to learn a little bit more about their experiences, to see if there's opportunities to do some cross collaboration, publishing work. Even if I could be the last scholar on, this long list of scholars a part of a research project, I really wish I would have taken advantage of reaching out to people and not being scared.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the advice that I would give my younger self. Again, I don't know if I would have taken that advice up given the chaos of just my life, day in and day. But yeah.
Yeah. So if you're busy, okay. But if you're making the excuse that they won't listen to you or having some sort of imposter syndrome or not sure, then don't let that be a blocker, because you can move forward in that direction. So
yes. Sometimes yes.
Awesome. Well, Natalie, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I feel like there was probably so much more we could have dove into, but I really appreciate you sharing your journey, your balance of family, of research, of working in industry. I think it's really inspiring what you're working toward and driving to. For anybody who wants to follow your work or connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a very active user on LinkedIn, and I usually use that platform to do most of my connecting and networking and emailing. So please find me on LinkedIn and send me a message. Happy to connect.
Fantastic. Well, I will link to that in the show notes, and a big thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure. It was great to talk story with you.
Likewise. Thanks, Natalie. What an awesome conversation with Dr. Natalie Perez. I've actually known her for years, pre-PhD, so it's really cool to see where she is now in both her career and her research. I think she had so many practical tips for folks, even in the pre-PhD process, and understanding those financial decisions that might lead to the choices that you're making and things that you might want to consider on that path, even being in the program itself and navigating career choices that might impact your whole entire life and move somewhere else, and being open to those, to post PhD and being in industry, and how she really bridges this world. For example, the literature review being so similar to the needs analysis in an industry, and being able to find the gaps, tie those to the business needs, and maybe even pitch yourself for a different role at your organization once you graduate. So many amazing things. She's very active on LinkedIn, so definitely do connect with her. What resonated with you the most? I would love to hear your thoughts. Drop me a message or a comment. And thank you for tuning in to Connected. You can find all the links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone in your PhD community. And be sure to follow along on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube for more conversations just like this. So I will see you next time, and stay connected.